The trial has begun for a man accused of killing a college student over a year ago after she mistakenly entered his car believing it was her Uber ride. On Tuesday, the prosecution called the murder of Samantha Josephson heinous, cruel, and malicious. The 21-year-old was last seen at a bar in Columbia, South Carolina.
We've all had that awkward Uber moment, pulling the door handle only to realize it's the wrong car and the driver is staring at you like, "Do I know you?" It's funny, a little embarrassing, but usually it ends with a laugh and a quick, "Sorry, wrong ride." And if you've ever been out in cities like New York, Atlanta, or even down in Dallas, you'll notice people doing the same little dance at the curb, squinting at license plates, shuffling closer, double-checking like they're solving a puzzle. It's awkward, it's relatable, and most of the time it's harmless. But in Columbia, South Carolina, in the spring of 2019, that tiny everyday hesitation was missing, and because of it, a young woman stepped into the wrong car and never walked out again. Welcome back to the True Crime Family channel. Today, we're unraveling a case that proves sometimes the smallest mistake can change everything. We're going back to the spring of 2019, a little over 6 years ago, to Columbia, South Carolina. It's the state capital, a busy college town, and the place where this case takes a devastating turn. But Samantha Josephson's story doesn't begin there. She was born in Princeton, New Jersey, and grew up in the nearby community of Robbinsville. Her full name was Samantha Lee Josephson, though many people simply called her Sammy. She came into the world on August 13, 1997, the younger daughter of Seymour and Marcy Josephson. Sammy wasn't an only child. She had an older sister, Sydney, who was about 20 months ahead of her, and the two shared what looked to be a happy, grounded childhood. The sisters had different personalities, but they were close. Sydney remembered being the serious, cautious one, while Samantha was her complete opposite. Sammy was carefree, bold, and had very little fear. Their mother, Marcy, said she was the kind of child who was never afraid to try something new, always eager for adventure. She had energy to burn, was social and outgoing, and seemed to brighten the atmosphere wherever she went. Her father, Seymour, described how the moment Samantha walked into a room, everyone knew it. She drew people's attention without even trying. Samantha carried that same spark into school, where she consistently performed well. After finishing high school, she made a bold choice. Instead of staying close to home, she moved more than 600 miles away to South Carolina to attend the University of South Carolina in Columbia. There, she studied political science with the long-term dream of pursuing a law career. Her specific goal was to focus on international law. That transition couldn't have been easy at first, leaving behind her family and friends to start fresh in another state. But she adapted quickly. She settled into college life, made strong new friendships, and grew to love South Carolina. By the spring of 2019, Samantha was in her senior year. Graduation was only weeks away, and she was on the verge of completing her degree in political science. That spring break, Samantha and her close group of girlfriends went on a trip to Florida. They had an amazing time together before heading back to Columbia to finish their final stretch of university life. They returned, dove back into their studies, and started gearing up for graduation. But for Samantha, that milestone would never come. She was 21, full of plans, and had just been accepted into Drexel University's law program in Pennsylvania. Not only was she set to attend, but she had earned a full scholarship. It was the kind of opportunity she had worked so hard for, and she was ecstatic about it. To celebrate both her law school acceptance and the fast-approaching graduation, Samantha and her dorm mates planned a night out together on Thursday, March 28, 2019. That evening, Samantha, dressed in black jeans and an orange top, got ready with her friends and joined them for a celebratory night in the Five Points district of Columbia. It was an area filled with bars and clubs, a lively hub for students, and a regular spot for nights out. None of them could have imagined what that night would turn into, or that it would be the last time Samantha Josephson would celebrate anything. That night, Sammy and her friends made their way to the 5 Points district, a busy nightlife spot that was especially popular with university students. They ended up at the Bird Dog Bar, where the group spent hours drinking, laughing, and dancing together. All through the night, Samantha kept in close contact with her boyfriend, Greg. The two had been together for about 2 years by then. Greg had once been a student at the University of South Carolina too, but he had graduated the year before, in 2018. By the spring of 2019, he was back living in his hometown of Charleston. Even with the distance, their relationship was still strong, and in fact, they had already made serious plans for the future. When Samantha left for law school in Pennsylvania later that year, Greg planned to move with her. On that Thursday night, though, the distance felt heavier. Sammy missed him and tried to persuade him to come down to Columbia to see her. Greg told her no, not because he didn't want to, but because they were going to be together in just 2 days anyway when she traveled to Charleston for the weekend. They talked, texted, and stayed in close contact throughout her night out, and Greg reassured her that he would see her soon. Back inside Bird Dog, Samantha carried on celebrating with her friends until the early hours of the morning. Around 2 a.m., things began winding down. One of her friends, Jacqueline, wasn't feeling well from drinking and decided to leave first. Samantha stayed behind for a short while longer before deciding it was time to head home as well. She said her goodbyes, stepped outside, and pulled up the Uber app on her phone. Ordering a rideshare after a night out wasn't unusual for her. In fact, her father, Seymour, had given her access to his credit card specifically so she could always pay for an Uber and make it home safely. CCTV from outside the bar captured Samantha as she waited. She stood there alone, still on the phone with Greg, glancing at every car that drove by, trying to figure out which one was hers. At 2:12 a.m., her ride arrived. She hung up the call with her boyfriend, climbed into the car, and left. But she never made it back to her dorm. From that moment, Samantha Josephson was never seen alive again. When her friends woke up later that morning around 8 a.m., they realized something was wrong. Samantha's bed looked untouched, as though she had never returned the night before. They started calling and texting her phone, but there was no response. That silence was alarming on its own, but the group had a safety system in place. They all used the Find My Friends feature on their phones to track one another's locations if needed. They tried to check Samantha's phone that way, but her location wouldn't load. It only showed no location found. Greg was experiencing the same problem. He had also been trying to track her after their last phone call, and the final ping he got confused him. The phone had last registered in the opposite direction of Samantha's dorm. He assumed she might have gone to stay at a friend's place, but by 8 a.m., even that explanation no longer fit because the location had gone completely dark. Her friends grew more frantic. They even drove to the area Greg had identified as her phone's last location. It turned out to be nothing more than a random spot with no trace of Samantha or her belongings. They started calling around, reaching out to other friends to ask if anyone had seen or heard from her. No one had. Another red flag came when they checked with her workplace. Samantha held a part-time job at a local sandwich shop, and she was scheduled to work that morning. When her friends contacted the shop, they learned that she had never shown up for her shift. Missing a work commitment was completely out of character for her. With no answers and their worry growing, the group decided the best chance of finding out what had happened was to retrace her steps. They went back to the Bird Dog Bar, the last place they knew she had been. The manager there happened to be a friend, so when Samantha's friends explained the situation, he allowed them to review the bar's CCTV from the previous night. On the screen, they saw Samantha leaving the bar, Waiting outside and climbing into the car she believed was her Uber. That was all they needed to realize something was terribly wrong. She had never returned home, her phone was untraceable, and now the footage showed her getting into a car she never got out of. Trusting their instincts, her friends took what they had seen straight to the Columbia police and filed a missing persons report. As soon as Samantha's disappearance was reported, a missing persons investigation was launched. The police notified her family back in New Jersey, and the news sent Seymour and Marcy Josephson into panic. Their daughter had vanished after a night out, and they weren't going to sit around waiting for updates. Without hesitation, they got into their car and began the 600-mile drive down to Columbia, determined to do everything they could to help in the search. Detectives didn't take long to uncover their first disturbing lead. When they went back to review the footage of Samantha leaving the Bird Dog Bar and getting into a car outside, they realized something crucial. That vehicle wasn't her Uber. After ordering a ride through the app, Samantha was told her driver would arrive in a dark Dodge. On the CCTV, she was seen scanning every car that passed, clearly trying to figure out which one matched. But the car she ended up climbing into wasn't a Dodge at all. It was a black Chevrolet Impala. Samantha had unknowingly entered the wrong vehicle. Her real Uber driver had eventually canceled the trip after being unable to locate her. She had no idea. Instead, she found herself sitting inside the car of a stranger. And now she was gone. The possibility that this wasn't an accident hit detectives almost immediately. When they tracked down other cameras in the 5 Points district, they noticed the same Impala circling the area before 2 a.m. The car had been driving slowly, looping around the block, lingering near the Bird Dog Bar. It looked like the driver was scanning the streets, maybe searching for a vulnerable target. Just before Samantha approached, the Impala was seen pulling into a nearby parking lot. It stopped, made a U-turn, and drove back out toward where she was waiting. The timing was chilling. The driver pulled up, and Samantha, believing it was her ride, opened the door and got inside. That sequence of movements made investigators think this wasn't a crime of chance. It looked calculated, premeditated. The driver appeared to be prowling for someone to lure in, and when he saw Samantha alone, he seized the opportunity. But identifying the car's owner wasn't going to be easy. The cameras couldn't capture a clear view of the license plate, and the tinted windows hid the driver's face. Detectives responded by issuing a BOLO, a Be on the Lookout alert, to law enforcement across the state, warning officers to watch for a black Chevy Impala. They also released footage of the vehicle to the public, hoping someone might recognize it. While that search unfolded, investigators began checking Samantha's financial records. They wanted to see if her bank account had been touched after she vanished. The results were another red flag. Multiple attempts had been made to withdraw money from her account at different ATMs. When detectives pulled the security footage from those ATMs, it confirmed their fears. The person trying to take money wasn't Samantha. It was a man whose identity was hidden. He kept his hood pulled up and used his jacket to shield his face from the camera, going out of his way not to be recognized. Was this man the same person behind the wheel of the Impala? Was he the one who picked Samantha up outside the bar? Had he kidnapped her and, worse, already ended her life? The questions hung in the air, but the truth wasn't far behind. That very same day, Samantha was reported missing, March 29th, 2019. Police received another call. This one would change everything. At around 3:45 in the afternoon, a pair of turkey hunters were moving through a wooded stretch in a small town called New Zion, located in Clarendon County, about 65 miles from Columbia. What they stumbled upon was nothing short of horrifying. Lying in the brush was the body of a young woman. She was drenched in blood, her skin torn apart by dozens upon dozens of stab wounds. The hunters dialed police right away. When officers arrived, the reality hit them quickly. The clothing on the victim matched exactly what 21-year-old Samantha Josephson had been wearing the night she vanished. The woman had the same long, dark hair. The search for a missing student had now shifted into a murder case. Detectives informed Samantha's family, who had been desperately holding on to hope, that their daughter was not coming home. She had been brutally murdered. It's impossible to imagine what it must have felt like for them to not only hear that Samantha was dead, but to also learn just how violently her life was taken. The autopsy revealed the true scale of the attack. Samantha had endured more than 120 stab wounds. 120. The blade had pierced her legs, chest, feet, shoulders, torso, even her face and neck. It was believed a double-edged knife had been used, and the wounds showed she had tried desperately to fight back. Some of the cuts went straight through her hands, injuries that happened as she raised them to protect herself. The level of blood loss was staggering. The average human body carries 4 to 5 liters of blood, close to a gallon. Samantha's body was left with just 20 milliliters, barely more than a single tablespoon. She had been drained almost entirely, and this wasn't an instant death. According to the coroner, the frenzy of stabbing was delivered quickly, but Samantha would have remained alive for 10 to 20 minutes before succumbing. That means she endured unthinkable agony, fighting for her life minute after minute, terrified and bleeding until her body could no longer go on. There was no evidence she had been sexually assaulted, but that didn't rule out a sexual motive. Investigators considered the possibility that the killer may have planned an assault but was stopped by her resistance, or that he drew some form of gratification simply from inflicting such a violent act. Or perhaps the reason for her murder was something else entirely. At that point, detectives simply didn't know. What they did know was that Samantha hadn't been killed in the woods. She had been murdered elsewhere and then dumped in that isolated spot in New Zion. Whoever had done this had gone to great lengths to cover their tracks. Meanwhile, the search for the black Chevy Impala intensified. A bolo had already been issued statewide, and footage of the car had been shown to the public. Soon, police got a tip. Employees at a Wendy's remembered seeing a black Impala in their drive-thru around noon on March 29th. The driver was a young black man, but what really caught their attention was the back seat. Draped across it was a white sheet. The workers couldn't shake the feeling that the sheet wasn't just there by accident. It looked like he was trying to conceal something he didn't want anyone to see. The tip from Wendy's turned out to be right on target, but police didn't have to wait long to find the black Chevy Impala themselves. In the early hours of March 3rd, less than a full day after Samantha's body was discovered, patrol officers driving around the Firelands district spotted a car exactly like the one in their bulletins, the very same area where Samantha had last been seen. It was about 2:30 in the morning when they pulled the vehicle over. 2 people were inside, a man behind the wheel and a young woman in the passenger seat. The driver was asked for his license. He told officers he didn't have it on him. The smell of marijuana lingered in the car, and when questioned, he admitted he had smoked earlier in the day. Officers asked him to step outside. As the man got out, one of the officers began explaining, "Here's the deal. Your car matches a suspect." But before the words could even land, the officer noticed something. The man's hands were buried deep in his pockets. Immediately, the command came, "Take your hands out." Instead of complying, the man turned and bolted. He ran full speed into the night. Officers sprinted after him, calling in over the radio that they were chasing a suspect in a gray tracksuit. Within minutes, other units converged. The man's escape ended when he quite literally ran into additional officers waiting in his path. By 3 a.m., he was in custody. Back at the car, the young woman in the passenger seat was questioned. She wasn't under arrest, but officers wanted to know who the driver was. She told them his name was Nate. That man was soon identified as 24-year-old Nathaniel Rowland of South Carolina. He lived with his parents in New Zion, the very same town where Samantha's body had been dumped. He knew the area well. Roland had once been a student at East Clarendon School and had briefly attended South Carolina State University, but by 2019 he was no longer enrolled anywhere. He didn't seem to have a job either. His record showed only one prior arrest, in October 2018, for obtaining property under false pretenses. It was a relatively minor charge, nothing that suggested what would come next. To most people, Roland appeared like a normal, approachable guy. But now he was sitting in the center of a murder investigation, and the fact that he tried to run the moment police linked his car to a crime scene, that didn't exactly scream innocence. While Roland was being booked, investigators began combing through the black Chevy Impala. What they uncovered left no doubt they were on the right track. Inside the car was a pink iPhone. Alongside it, a set of pink keys labeled Room. Both belonged to Samantha Josephson. The very items she carried with her on the night she vanished were sitting in Nathaniel Roland's vehicle. And that wasn't all. The car wasn't just holding Samantha's possessions. It was soaked in blood. When officers shone their flashlights into Nathaniel Roland's car, the sight was overwhelming. Blood was everywhere. It stained the passenger seat, soaked deep into the back seat, and pooled in the trunk. There was so much blood that it had seeped through the upholstery. The vehicle itself was a crime scene. This was where Samantha Josephson had been murdered. Later, DNA testing confirmed it. The blood was Samantha's, but it also looked like Roland had tried to cover his tracks. In the trunk, police found bottles of bleach, window cleaner, and used wipes, all of them streaked with blood. He had attempted to scrub it away, but the violence of what happened in that car was impossible to erase. Then, investigators noticed something even more chilling. The child locks on the rear doors had been engaged. Once Samantha was inside, there was no way she could have opened those doors from the back seat. She was trapped, but she had fought to get out. On the rear window, police found the print of a bare foot. Samantha had been kicking the glass, desperate to break it and escape. Forensic testing later confirmed the footprint was hers. The image of her trying, with every ounce of strength, to shatter that window before the end is haunting. She fought for her life inside that car, but the odds were against her. Back in custody, Roland was questioned. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Samantha's possessions, her blood, the state of his car, he denied everything. He told investigators he had nothing to do with her death. Still, police pressed forward. Inside the Impala, they found a piece of paper, and on it was a handwritten list. Words like duct tape, gloves, gasoline, matches, and all black. To detectives, it read like a checklist, not random scribbles. A plan, preparation for a crime. Another sign that what happened to Samantha wasn't spontaneous. It was premeditated. Then there was another discovery. A separate paper in the car turned out to be an eviction notice, and it led police to the home of Maria Howard, Roland's girlfriend. Though he lived with his parents in New Zion, he also spent time with Maria at her house in Columbia. With a warrant in hand, investigators searched her property. In the garbage bins outside, they uncovered the most damning evidence yet. Blood-stained clothing that witnesses had seen Roland wearing on the day Samantha was killed. Testing confirmed the blood belonged to Samantha. Alongside it was a knife. Not just any knife, but a double-bladed weapon, the very type used in the stabbing. And on that blade, too, was Samantha's blood. Police had not only linked Roland's car to the crime, they had his clothing, the victim's DNA, and now the murder weapon itself. When detectives spoke with Nathaniel Roland's girlfriend, Maria Howard, she had a lot to say. She remembered the morning after Samantha was killed. Nathaniel had been wearing rubber gloves, scrubbing down his car. She noticed him handling that strange double-bladed knife too, the same weapon that would later be linked to Samantha's death. He seemed to be cleaning that as well. Maria also recalled something that disturbed her even more. Her daughter had climbed into Nathaniel's car shortly after the killing. When she got out, there was blood on her shoes. Maria asked him about it. She asked about the knife, about why he was suddenly scrubbing his vehicle. Every time he brushed her off with the same chilling line, "Mind your own business." She also told investigators that she'd noticed a white sheet stretched across the back seat. It caught her attention because it matched exactly what Wendy's employees had described seeing when Nathaniel pulled through the drive-thru. And then she saw the news. Police were asking for information about a black Chevy Impala in connection with a missing young woman. Maria knew Nathaniel drove that exact car. The blood, the sheet, the knife, it all began to add up in her mind. But she never went to the police. She admitted she was terrified, afraid of what Nathaniel might do to her or to her daughter if she spoke up. That fear kept her silent. By then, the evidence against him was stacked so high, detectives had no doubt he was the one responsible for Samantha's murder. They still didn't know why he had done it, but motive or not, the proof was overwhelming. Nathaniel Rowland was charged with kidnapping, murder, and possession of a weapon during the commission of a crime. Even then, he stuck to his story. He denied any involvement. He pleaded not guilty, forcing the case to trial. It began in July 2021, more than 2 years after Samantha's death, delayed in part by the pandemic. The prosecution came ready. They had CCTV footage. They had his failed attempt to run from police. They had Samantha's belongings and her blood all over his car. They had the handwritten list of suspicious items. They had the clothes stained with her blood. And of course, they had the knife. But the defense had something they believed could crack the case open in their favor. None of Nathaniel Rowland's DNA was found on Samantha's body. Considering the brutal struggle she endured, that was a powerful point. They argued that if Rowland had been the attacker, there should have been some trace of him on her. His DNA under her nails, marks on his skin, some injury that showed he had fought with her. Yet when he was arrested less than 24 hours later, there were no scratches, no cuts, nothing. The defense admitted Samantha was killed in Rowland's car, but insisted that didn't mean he was the one behind the wheel that night. Maybe someone else had been using his vehicle. Maybe that was the real killer. It was a fair argument, one that forced the jury to think. But the prosecution had an answer. They pointed to the black leather jacket police found in the garbage outside Maria Howard's home. It was Nathaniel's jacket, and across the material were what looked like scratch marks. They argued that Samantha had clawed at him during the struggle, but the leather had taken the damage instead of his skin. It explained why her DNA wasn't on his body. She hadn't been scratching him directly. She had been clawing against what he was wearing. If Nathaniel was wearing that leather jacket during the attack, it explained everything. Samantha had tried to fight back, but her nails never reached his skin. All she managed to scratch was the jacket itself. And as for the lack of cuts or marks on his body, that wasn't hard to explain either. He was the one holding the weapon. She was fighting for her life unarmed, while he had a double-bladed knife in his hands. The odds were stacked against her from the start, and that same knife told its own story. Forensics revealed traces of DNA from both Samantha and Nathaniel on the blade. His DNA was on the weapon, along with hers. How do you explain that away? The prosecution said you couldn't. They brought witness after witness to testify. Maria Howard, Nathaniel's girlfriend, stood up in front of the jury and told them what she had seen. Nathaniel cleaning his car with gloves on. Nathaniel with the knife. The white sheet in the back seat. All the little details she had lived with but had been too afraid to report at the time. Then came another witness, a local phone repair shop owner. He told the court that the very morning after Samantha was murdered, Nathaniel had walked into his store trying to sell a phone. That phone turned out to be Samantha's, the same one later discovered inside his car. Nathaniel hadn't gone through with the sale, only because he didn't like the price the shopkeeper offered. But the attempt showed exactly what he was trying to do: get rid of evidence. The prosecution's theory was that this wasn't random at all. They believed Nathaniel had planned the attack. That night, he cruised around the 5 Points district deliberately, prowling in his black Chevy Impala. Why? Nobody knows for sure. Maybe it was robbery. Maybe it was something darker. But they argued that he was looking for a victim, and in 5 Points he knew he'd find young students spilling out of bars, drunk, distracted, and vulnerable. He didn't even need to lure Samantha into his car. She climbed in herself, believing it was her Uber. But the illusion shattered quickly. Instead of driving her toward home, Nathaniel steered in the opposite direction. That was when panic would have set in. That was when she would have realized she wasn't safe. She tried to escape, but the child locks were engaged. No way out. She kicked at the back window with her bare foot, desperate to break the glass. She clawed at Nathaniel, or at least at the jacket he was wearing, trying to fight him off. But she didn't stand a chance against the knife. In what prosecutors described as a frenzied attack, Nathaniel stabbed her more than 120 times. Wound after wound, she grew weaker from the blood loss until, finally, after 10 to 20 agonizing minutes, Samantha Josephson died inside that car. She was only 21 years old. Nathaniel then drove her body to his hometown of New Zion. Without hesitation, he dumped her in a wooded area and left her there, where turkey hunters would later make the grim discovery. Afterward, he scrambled to cover his tracks. He tried selling her phone. He threw away his blood-stained clothes and the murder weapon. He scrubbed at the car with bleach and wipes. He even tried using Samantha's bank card to pull money from her account. But no matter what he did, the evidence clung to him. And for reasons nobody can quite understand, he drove back through the 5 Points district the very next night. The same area crawling with police, the same streets where officers were hunting for a black Chevy Impala. It made no sense, but that mistake led to his arrest. The trial closed on July 27, 2021. It didn't take the jury long, just about an hour to reach a verdict. Guilty on all counts: kidnapping, murder, and possession of a weapon during a violent crime. Nathaniel Rowland was sentenced to life in prison without parole. He would never walk free again. Even then, he refused to take responsibility. At sentencing, he stood before the judge and said, "Your Honor, I know I'm innocent. I just wish the state had done more to find the real person instead of being satisfied with detaining me and proving my guilt." His mother, Loretta, also spoke, insisting her son wasn't the killer. But the evidence was undeniable. The jury had seen it, the prosecution had laid it out, and the sentence was final. When Nathaniel's mother, Loretta, tried to stand in court and insist her son was innocent, the judge cut her off. He told her flatly that he wouldn't allow her to stand before Samantha's grieving family and make claims that went against the jury's verdict. Her denial was obvious, but the evidence had spoken. Nathaniel Rowland was sentenced to life in prison without parole, and that was the end of it. He tried to appeal, but the appeal was rejected. To this day, he remains behind bars. In the wake of Samantha's murder, her parents refused to let their daughter's story end there. They wanted her legacy to protect others, especially students like her who used ride shares regularly. Because what had led Samantha into Nathaniel's car that night was a simple mistake. Believing his black Chevy was her Uber, she likely asked him if he was there for Samantha, and when he lied and said yes, she trusted him. That trust cost her everything. So her family launched the What's My Name Foundation. Its message was simple but powerful. Don't ask a driver if they're there for you. Instead, ask them, "Who are you here to pick up?" If they can't give your name, don't get into the car. That one small shift could save countless lives. The Josephsons also pushed for new safety measures in ride-sharing. In June 2019, South Carolina passed the Samantha Josephson Ride-Sharing Safety Act, requiring ride-share cars to display their license plate numbers clearly on the front of the vehicle. Anyone pretending to be a ride-share driver could now face a $500 fine or even jail time. In New Jersey, where Samantha had grown up, lawmakers passed Sammy's Law. It required ride-share vehicles to display 2 placards with the driver's name, photo, and license plate, so passengers could confirm they were getting into the right car. Seymour and Marcy Josephson didn't stop there. They worked with Congress to push for a federal version of Sammy's Law to improve ride-share safety nationwide. Their daughter's life had been stolen, but they were determined her story would protect others. A few months after her death, in May 2019, Samantha was awarded her political science degree at what would have been her graduation ceremony. She wasn't there to walk across the stage herself, but her family was there to accept it in her honor. Samantha had dreamed of going to law school. She wanted to become a lawyer, to build a future that everyone who knew her believed was wide open with possibility. She was brilliant, driven, and full of life. All of that promise was stolen at just 21 years old. And that's where Samantha's story ends, but her legacy doesn't. The truth is, stories like hers are why we tell these cases. Not to sensationalize, not to scare you, but to keep her name alive and to make sure what happened to her isn't repeated. If this case moved you the way it moved me while telling it, then let's make sure Samantha's story reaches further than this video. Every share, every like, it's not just a button you're pressing, it's another voice keeping her memory alive, another reminder to someone out there to stop and ask, "What's my name?" before they get into a car. So if you want to do something that matters in Samantha's name, let's push this story out together.